Our first guest father created the iconic Star Trek character, Mr. Spock. In his new memoir, Leonard Nimoy's son, Adam, shares their rocky father-son relationship, their journey through troubled marriages, addictions, and finally, reconciliation. We welcome to AM Northwest the author of The Most Human, Adam Nimoy. Good to have you with us, Adam.
Thank you for having me.
This is not your first time to Portland.
No, I was here in 1967 with my dad. He was the Grand Marshal of the Rose Parade, and we sat in an open-air vehicle and traveled the streets of Portland.
Tell me about the memory you have, because you say you remember this really well.
I do, because it was very early on in my dad's, the success of his career, and we were out of the state of California for one of the first times in my life, and it was a very exotic kind of a trip, and it was very exciting to be with the fans and to be a part of the parade. It was a great feeling. I just really enjoyed being in the city.
Yeah. Why write the memoir? Why was it important to you?
Well, because, you know, it's just a father-son dynamic relationship that I felt would resonate with other people.
Yeah.
I mean, irrespective of the fact that my father is Leonard Nimoy, we had a lot of difficulties, and it seems to resonate with other people who have difficulties with a parent or another family member.
Sure.
And that there's hope and reconciliation even later in life if you really work at the relationship.
Talk about the title, The Most Human.
Well, The Most Human came from, it's a line from Kirk's eulogy of Spock in Star Trek II after Spock has expired.
Right.
It just seemed like, it seemed really appropriate because, I mean, Kirk is basically saying of all the souls he's met through his travels through the universe, Spock was one of the most human.
Right.
And the fact is, you know, I was just, the story is really kind of humanizing my dad, that both he and I had you know, issues as most people do. I mean, we make mistakes. And we just had to find ways to kind of like reconcile our relationship and get over some of the problems we had.
Right. The cover photo is just so wonderful. It might be one of my favorites. Okay, there's a picture of you with him on set.
Same day as the cover, yeah.
Same day as the cover. And tell me about that experience, because the makeup guy, hair guy, dressed you up to look like him.
Well, yeah, they were always pulling pranks on Dad and each other on the set.
Yeah.
And while Dad was filming a scene where he was in the captain's chair, Captain Kirk was on the Planet of the Week, the assistant director took me into the makeup room, and Fred Phillips, who did my dad's makeup every day, cut my hair, shaved my eyebrows, and glued on a pair of my dad's ears. And I came out in the scene behind my dad as a joke and gave him a kiss and said, "Hello, Daddy." And then they broke for lunch, and we had these pictures taken.
We have this picture taken. It's fantastic. Let's talk about growing up with him, growing up with Leonard Nimoy. Yeah. He was a hard worker. He worked on a number of shows before Star Trek came to be. Well,
yeah, I mean, this is kind of where the problems in our relationship began, because my dad was a workaholic. Yeah. He was trying to get his career going, and he was on a number of different episodes. I mean, dozens of bit parts in TV shows, all the while hustling, you know, trying to get odd jobs going in Los Angeles to try to support our family. So he was not around much for me to really try to connect with.
Right. And he came from a tough family too, right? Wasn't his,
well, yes.
His relationship with his father challenging?
Yeah, it was very challenging. He was the son of Russian immigrants. They came from Ukraine, but they considered themselves Russian. They immigrated to Boston. He was born during the Depression. They were not very emotive, his parents, or they were not very affectionate with him, and he, you know, he was hustling to generate income to help keep the family going.
Right. When he got Star Trek and that role of Spock, which everyone, I love Spock, everyone loves Spock. When he got that role, things really changed.
Well, yeah, things changed a lot in our household. We went, you know, from kind of an obscure family to a favorite of the fanzines. I mean, we had photographers there all the time. 16 Magazine accidentally printed our home address as the mailing address for fan mail from Mr. Spock.
Oh my gosh.
And we were getting sacks of mail all the time. I mean, things changed overnight for us.
And then how did your relationship with your dad, what was going on with it?
Well, then it became more complicated because we couldn't even be out on a father-son outing in public because he'd be mobbed by people.
Right.
And as I grew older, in my teen years is when Star Trek, my dad went from Star Trek to Mission Impossible for 2 seasons. That's 5 years of solid TV work when he wasn't really around that much.
Right.
And when Mission was over and he was around the house, I was a teenager in my rebellious years.
Right.
And my dad was at home focusing on my life, and that's when the headbanging really started between us.
Well, he was an alcoholic. Talk about his drinking, and then you became someone who liked to smoke pot a lot.
On a daily basis, that's correct. Yeah, I mean, he admitted his alcoholism, and the trouble that we had, which turned into more kind of overt conflict, I think it was exacerbated by the fact that he was deep in his disease as I was in mine, and it did not help our relationship. And so, look, our relationship, there were a lot of high points. I mean, I mean, my dad had a great career, and I was there with him, and I really enjoyed, I was very proud of what he had accomplished, and I loved my dad.
Yeah.
But our lives together were punctuated by periodic incidents of extreme conflict with one another until we both got into recovery.
He was drinking oftentimes because of the stress he was having on the set of Star Trek. And you mentioned briefly about his relationship with William Shatner, Captain Kirk.
There was that too as well, yeah. They had some issues with each other.
Oh, you're being short about it. Well, what's going on? Tell me more.
It's a matter of public record.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad talked about it. Bill has talked about it. I mean, they had some competition on the set when they were making the original series.
Gotcha.
And they had some issues thereafter, but there was a period of time where they were actually very close.
Yeah.
And that was a wonderful period where my dad considered Bill his best friend.
He became really close to George Takei, too.
George was always a good friend, and I love George, and he and my dad had the same kind of political, social outlook of being, you know, being activists. So they had that connection. Yes, George has always been a very close friend of the family.
And he read your book, I understand.
He was kind enough to read the book and give me a positive blurb. Yes.
So tell me when things. When he decided to kind of change his ways, what happened? In other words, when it comes to alcoholism, what happened? Did he just decide one day, I've got to quit drinking?
Yes, he was remarried, he was happy with his life, and he couldn't understand why he was still drinking.
Yeah.
And that's when he called a friend of his who was in AA, and he started going to 12-step meetings.
And did he take you to a 12-step meeting?
He did, and that was a problem because I had heard the 12 steps for the first time, and when we got to steps 8 and 9 about making amends to people you have harmed during your addiction, I was very angry because he had never made a formal amends to me.
What would you have wanted him to do?
Well, just apologize, but it's just impossible for a guy like him. You know, apologies were really not a part of his vocabulary.
Right.
But later on in life, when I was in recovery and we started to reconcile with one another, my wife, Martha, was very sick with cancer, and my dad was my emotional support during that period.
You were the first person he was the first person you called when you found out.
That is correct. And my dad really showed up to me. We call that a living amends.
Yeah.
And that really kind of like sealed the deal between the two of us. We were very close and loving after that period of time.
And how did you feel as time went on and Star Trek became popular all over again, and in a big way, and you know, more series came on? You've worked with the cast, you've worked with the crew. Didn't you direct a few episodes?
I did. I was a practicing attorney for 7 years in the entertainment business. I wanted to do something more creative.
Right.
It was a time when my dad and I were doing very well together, and he helped me transition. And the first jobs I got were on The Next Generation. I was very lucky and grateful that they gave me the opportunity.
When you talk with any cast member, like a younger cast member in the later shows, and they experienced talking with him, because didn't he go along and advise the younger actors?
Well, yeah, with Zachary Quinto in particular, who took over as Spock. Yeah, my dad and Zachary had a very close relationship.
Tell me about that impact for him.
Well, I think he felt very confident that Zachary was going to really, you know, expand with the character, bring his own sensibility to the role.
Right.
I mean, the fact that they had a really close relationship, I think, made my dad feel very comfortable that the character was in good hands with handing the torch over to him.
Yeah. You made a documentary about your dad.
I did.
Tell me about that.
I was making the documentary with my dad in anticipation of the 50th anniversary of the original series. And we were going to make a documentary about Spock. We wanted to talk about the origin of Spock, the evolution of the character, the impact of the character on pop culture. And while we were putting it together, that's when my dad passed away. But we continued on, the producers and I, with making the documentary. We expanded it to include my dad's life, Leonard Nimoy, the artist, the Renaissance man, you know, the social activist.
Yeah.
And we included a little bit of my story with my dad, the ups and downs and the reconciliation that I had with him.
When he passed away, was it kind of like a jolt as to how people loved him so much?
Oh my God. Yeah.
It had to have been overwhelming for you.
It was huge. It was a tidal wave of emotion. I mean, the president weighed in.
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible. It was so phenomenal. It felt so good. It was it was such a way to help with the grieving process, to know that there were a lot of us in it together as a community, grieving the loss of not only the man who played the character, Mr. Spock, but just Leonard Nimoy, the incredible artist.
Once you and he reconciled, did you also realize how your relationship with him affected your relationship with your son?
Oh yeah, I mean, I tried very hard to have a very different relationship with my two kids at the time, and I was more connected to them. I'm from a different generation. My dad was really focused on his career just as a matter of survival. I had kind of a different outlook. I really wanted to balance raising my kids with my own career, so I was much more connected to them. Yet still, I made my own mistakes, and yet still, they both found very good reasons to be angry with me.
Yeah. Wow, incredible story. The book is fascinating, The Most Human. Thank you so much. Want to tell everyone there's a big event, and it is tonight for The Love of Spock, the documentary we were just talking about with director Adam Nimoy, tonight at 7:30 at Hollywood Theater. We're going to put all the information for you on our website at k2.com, and the book again is titled The Most Human. Adam Nimoy, thank you so much.
Helen, thank you for having me on.
You bet. All right, we'll be right back with more AM Northwest. Don't go away.